Good evening. This is Evan Gregory, and this is Bible Answers. We're going to be continuing our study in the book of John. We're looking at chapter 4 this evening, and we won't get through all of it. We'll get to about the first 20 something verses. And so we're just slowly making our way through the book of John. If you are watching, this is a live show. You can ask questions, leave comments. I'll try to respond to them. Just have it, hopefully, you'll make those question comments related to our topic or some Bible related question. And so, as always, this is brought to you by the North Columbus Church of Christ located in Columbus, Mississippi. The website is scrolling below me. It's northcolumbuschristians.com. We also have a YouTube page. And please, if you would, you can subscribe to our page. It's North Columbus Church of Christ. And if you find our channel, like our videos, subscribe to our channel, and that'll help us out always. And so again, we're looking at John chapter 4, and we'll get right into the lesson. And so John chapter 3 deals with Jesus and Nicodemus, and then it goes on to a scene with John and others being baptized. And in John chapter 4, beginning in verse 1, it says, "Therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees has heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself did not baptize but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again to Galilee. But he needed to go through Samaria, so he came to a city of Samaria which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well. It was about the sixth hour." So we see a situation where, again, John. At this point, Jesus hadn't came to the just to the forefront of, I guess you would say, the Jews, or the leaders of the Jews, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. He hasn't picked up steam yet. In their eyes and in the people's eyes. And at this point, they're still focused on John. But we see here that where the Pharisees are hearing that now Jesus is making and baptizing more disciples than John. So his disciples, Jesus' disciples here, are baptizing. And so when they know this, it says that he leaves Judea. And we don't know exactly why. Uh, because of the Pharisees hearing this, why it seems as though that's what made him leave. But it could be, as we see in multiple cases throughout Jesus' story, that we see these situations where people know him. They might be He might perform some miracle on them, and yet he tells them, "Don't tell people who I am. My time has not yet come." So this may be another example of that. That the time is just not right for Jesus, and so he departs Judea and he goes to Galilee. Now, remember, much of Jesus's, I guess you would say, travels are situated in the area of Galilee, that being the Sea of Galilee. I have a this is not the best and probably not the clearest map here, but this map shows these different mountains and cities in the area of Israel. And if you look at the northern part, where you might see looks like a little river, and then in the northern part of the area, I believe, and there's this town called An, maybe, and then you'll see Mount Tabor. You'll see this large body of water, and that is the Sea of Galilee. And so he's making his way north up to the area of Galilee from Judea. And so, as he's making his way up to Galilee, he has to go through Samaria. So, Samaria is in between Jerusalem and Galilee. And what needs to be said, when we're going into this area of Samaria, we have the Samaritans. And so, I'm trying not to say just a whole lot about this, because we'll see more of this later in this lesson. But the Jews and Samaritans don't get along here, And so he's having to go through Samaria, and these people are really just kind of they're mixed uh, Israelites and pagans. These are people that are kind of intermarried with these pagans, and their worship is focused on Mount Gerizim. And again, I bring up this map, and so in their eyes, Moses taught that they should worship at Mount Gerizim. Okay, according to the Hebrew Bible, rather their worship focus is in Jerusalem. And so he's making his way up through Samaria. And so we'll be getting into a situation where Jesus meets Samaritan. And so there is some issues with their religion. And so he's going up through this area. He goes into this area that's called Sychar. From my understanding, this would be what is called Shechem, or in that area of Shechem. You look back in, I believe it was in Genesis 33 and also in Joshua, we'll see this plot of ground that it says Jacob gave to his son, Joseph. And so Jesus is making his way there. He makes his way to Jacob's well. He's wearied. He's making these travels. I would understand why he has to make a stop. And so this is where we pick up on this story. So he's sitting by this well. And then in verse 7, he meets a Samaritan woman. And it says, a woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, give me a drink, for his disciples have gone away into the city to buy food. Then the women of Samaria said to him, how is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Jesus answered and said to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you a living water. So Jesus asked this Samaritan woman to give him some water. And the woman is shocked. And if you understand the relationship between a Jew and a Samaritan, you would understand why this is such a big deal. Here it says that Jews have no dealings with Samaritans, and she's shocked at why he would even ask her. Right? So he would. There's no way that he should be asking her this. He should be drawing his own water, and he doesn't really respond directly to this question, but he makes another point. He says, if you knew who it was that asked this question, you would have asked him, and he would have given you a living water. And so he brings up this idea of living water, which causes this woman to think, what is he talking about here? And so what we'll read later on here is that he's not talking about actual water. So we see the Samaritan woman, we see Jesus asking for water, her responding, and then him changing the subject a little bit. He starts talking about living water, and that brings us into verses 11 through 14. It says, the woman said to him, sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and his livestock? Jesus answered and said to her, whoever drinks of this water will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life. So she asked, Jesus, where do you get this living water? You can't, you have nothing to draw with. You can't even get to this water yourself. So where then do you get to this particular water? She says, are you greater than our father Jacob? Which again is pretty interesting. Again, going back to the relationship between the Jew and the Samaritan, the Samaritans, they're not saying that that their lineage is different. They have their father Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. They claim to follow Moses as well, but their worship is different. They actually had a, version of the first five books of the Old Testament. And there's some changes that they've made from the original Hebrew Bible, in which there is that focus on Mount Gerizim and this different worship that they would be following, but they still claim the fathers of the Jews. So there is some there is some connectedness there, but again, the Jews have separated themselves from the Samaritans. And so she's saying, are you greater than Jacob? You can't get this water. Are you greater than Jacob or our fathers? Are you somebody special? Really, is what she's asking, and probably saying that sarcastically. But again, Jesus makes it clear what he's talking about. He's not talking about this water. Again, he says, if you drink of this water, you're going to thirst again. If you drink of this living water, you're never going to thirst again. But notice what he says in verse 14. But if the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life. So he's telling exactly what this water is. He's not worried about the well at this point. He's not worried about being actually thirsty. He's talking about eternal life. And he's using this idea of water, that you're going to receive this necessary thing for life. But he's not talking about physical. He's talking about spiritual life, eternal life. And I don't know exactly what all he's talking about, how this fountain of water is going to spring up into everlasting life. But I think we all recognize that what he's talking about is, I'm going to give you hope. I'm going to give you the way in which you can have your sins forgiven, and again, the way to receive everlasting life. And so the Samaritan woman is hearing that story, and I think that once she hears that, her ears would prick up a little bit. That this is an unusual conversation that she is having with this individual, and it takes us to verses 15 through 20. And the woman says to him, Sir, give me this water that I may not thirst, nor come here to draw. So again, she's still thinking about actual water. All right. She's still working, you give me this water that I won't ever thirst again. Seems like she misses the point about everlasting life. But she's, again, concerned about actual water, that which she can take and never be thirsty again. But Jesus says to her, Go call your husband and come here. The woman answered and said, I have no husband. Jesus said to her, You have well said, I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and the one whom you now have is not your husband. Is in that you spoke truly. The woman said to him, Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worship on this mountain, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem is the place where one ought to worship. So she seems to not be quite getting the point here, but Jesus then asked for a husband, and through this, he's able, I think, to kind of clear up and try to get more to the point of what he's trying to say here. He tells her to go get her husband. She doesn't have a husband, and he tells her, well, yeah, you don't have no husband, but you have had 5 husbands, and there's one that you have now that is not your husband. And so he tells her of her particular situation. He couldn't have known if it was just an ordinary man. He couldn't have known. They don't know each other. And so he's able to miraculously know this the history of this woman, and through that she's able to figure out, hey, this is somebody unusual. She says, Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. You know these things. You couldn't know these things without God. And she asked this question. She says, Our fathers worship on this mountain, which would be Mount Gerizim, and you Jews say in Jerusalem is the place where one ought to worship. And again, I think it's she's telling them a little bit about their relationship. They have some differences religiously, but I find it interesting that this woman Once she figures out or perceives that he is a prophet, she starts asking spiritual questions. And I think it kind of hints at what type of attitude this woman has, even though she lives this sinful lifestyle. And so she asked him about, what should we be doing here? Y'all worship in Jerusalem. We worship here on this mountain. It takes us to verses 21 through 26, where Jesus says to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming where you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews." So we'll stop there. Notice what he's saying here. So he says, "There's coming a time, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father." Okay, so he's telling there's a time coming where we won't be worshiping in either of those places. But notice what he says. He says, "You worship what you do not know. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews." So he's saying that you're wrong. You worship what you don't know. We know what we worship, for salvation of the Jews. So he's saying the Jews are worshiping properly. I think that he's answering her question here. But again, before that, he's saying, well, there's going to come a time where all of this is obsolete. We're not going to be worshiping on the mountain or in Jerusalem. So he says, "But the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." The woman said to him, "I know that Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things." Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you am he." So he's saying, now, the Jews are rightly focused on worship in Jerusalem. They're focused rightly on getting all of these things correct, worshiping properly according to the law. But he says things are going to change, right? And he says that the hour is coming, and now is. So currently there is a change taking place when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. And so he's telling them that, again, it's not going to be about worshiping in the right place. That we're not going to be so focused on locations and nationalities, and one being a Jew and one being not. There's going to be something different in which the focus is not, hey, we're making sure we're making our way to Jerusalem. We're making sure that we offer this sacrifice properly. And again, and I don't want to minimize those things. Those things were important and had to be followed. But it seemed like it did cause a problem with the Jews, and that they've become so focused on those locations and technicalities that it seem like they just forget why they're doing it. And the focus becomes more on those objects rather than on God himself. And so there's going to be a change in which the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. So they're going to be worshiping him according to truth, but also in spirit, in the right spirit, in which they're going to be they're not just going to be going through the motions. They're going to have that right attitude, that right motivation, doing those things for the right and proper reasons. They're serving God because he's God, because of what he's done for them, and not just going about it just to check a box and making sure they get everything just right. But again, they're doing these things according to truth as well. And so he says that the Father is seeking such to worship him. And so the woman says, "I know that the Messiah is coming, the Christ is coming, and he's going to straighten things out. When he comes, he's going to tell us all things." And Jesus says, I who speak to you am he. I am the Messiah here, right? So he would be able to clear up all those things. He's going to be the one that's going to tell us all things and tell us the truth. And so, a lot of good things that we see in these passages of scriptures, of which telling us the change is going to take place, is taking place. That again, we're having to do these things properly according to law, but there is going to be a change. And I think it's interesting that there are even people today that they do get caught up, people that call themselves Christians, they get caught up in, well, we need to follow certain parts of the old law, just and parts that are not reaffirmed in the new covenant. For example, like keeping the Sabbath, or whatever it may be, or uh, you know maybe they're even thinking about offering certain sacrifices, or keeping away from certain types of food, or keeping certain Jewish feasts and holy days. But Jesus here is saying that there's going to be something different. You're not going to be worshiping on this mountain. You're not going to be worshiping Jerusalem, which implies that there's going to be a changing of that law. That there's not going to be a focus on that old law, although at that time it was important and needed to be kept, and it is still is useful for us today. But again, Jesus is saying there's something different that is coming. That this not going to be according to the old law. It's not going to be according to the law of the Samaritans. It's going to be those. It's going to be a new law, and the worshipers, those that follow him, are going to be following him in spirit and truth. And so we're going to stop there. Next time, we're going to continue looking at John chapter 4. I don't know if we'll go through, get done with all of it, but we'll just make our way as we can. Again, if you got any questions or comments, feel free to leave that here. I'll try to respond to it. And again, these videos are being posted on YouTube. If you need to see these or want to watch these at a later time, or even look at our historical, I say historical, our archived videos might be the way to say that. And it's, I think sometimes it's hard to look at those old videos on Facebook, and that's why we put them on YouTube, and that you can very clearly, easily find our channel and see all of our past videos. And I hope that is useful for you. I got a lot of them, or we got a lot of them up there that you can watch. We looked at multiple books. We look at multiple topics, and feel free to look at those and view those videos. And I hope that that those things will be useful for you. But until next time, I hope that you have a good day, good night, good rest of the week, and hope to see you on later videos. Thanks.